It's time for the blood hunt to begin. Welcome to the Comicstorian Full Story channel, where we take a collection of complete stories and put them into one big video to give you a better viewing experience. Today, we're covering Blood Hunt, aka Marvel vs. Vampires, which was a recent event at Marvel in which vampires arrived, the Dark Force was manipulated, and, well, you can watch the video to see what else happens. Sadly, Benny passed away before he could finish telling this story on the channel, and so I took the reins and finished it for him. So, the voiceover will change partway through, but the story is amazing, and I hope you enjoy.
Across the world, heroes who use the Dark Force are going haywire. Portals to the Dark Dimension are opening and a powerful energy is escaping. In New York, Scarlet Witch has arrived on the scene, moving forward as Blackout raises into the air, dark energy writhing upward into the sky. Iron Man to Scarlet Witch, I'm in the air and it's looking bad. What are we seeing on the ground? Tony asks her. It's Blackout. He was robbing a bank and then he exploded, Wanda reports. Iron Man raises up into the sky, watching as dark energy travels upward, blacking out the sky, blocking the sun. Can you, close them with your magic? Tony asks her and Wanda nods. Certainly, and when I'm done, perhaps I'll go punch out Galactus. She scoffs and Tony sighs. I was really hoping we could use magic to get rid of this one. We're losing the sun, Tony tells her. In New York, Hunter's Moon and Tigra watch as the new Moon Knight explodes. Dark energy shooting off into the sky. Tigra looks at her phone, confirming that it is happening across the world. Darkening of the skies, hiding of the sun, hiding the moon. This isn't a mishap. This isn't an accident, Hunter's Moon says. They both turn, looking up as vampires descend upon them and the civilians around them. It's an attack, Hunter's Moon says. With the skies darkening, the vampires rise up, attacking around the world. In Latveria, people rush across the borders, discovering that it is magically protected from vampires. From his castle, Doom is happy. Excellent. Latveria's borders are secure. Over in Brooklyn, Miles Morales leaps into the air, stabbing a vampire with his venom blade. Okay, vampires, right? What would Blade do? The young hero asks himself as he watches the creature disappear into ash. Miles whirls around as someone steps out of the shadows. That's a good question, isn't it? Blade says as he walks up upon our hero. Things are looking bad, Spider-Man, but I've got a plan. It's not just down to what I do. I've got something that I need you to do. Meanwhile, the rest of the Avengers are fighting, Earth's mightiest heroes, but they're falling back against the onslaught of undead creatures. Where have all of these vampires come from? What did I miss? Thor asks as he whirls his hammer, firing a blast of lightning. Vision comes across the line, confirming that Dracula's whereabouts are currently unknown, though Sam doesn't think that Dracula would risk his new vampire nation. Suddenly, a new voice cuts on the line. Blade is speeding through the city in a massive truck. This is Blade. I'm on the run, and I have information. We need to meet. Lock onto my coordinates and teleport this rig to the Impossible City. Meet you there. Blade out. Aboard the Impossible City, Tony sighs. Works for me. Avengers, I'm calling you home. Moments later, the Avengers have all been teleported to the Impossible City. We've got to make this quick. We're all needed down there, Carol says as she moves forward, and Thor agrees. My rage is endless, Carol. An endless number of foes for which I can beat upon. But they have the numbers and we do not. Not without the sun. Suddenly, the teleporter flares up and Blade's truck comes screeching in. Blade, what the hell is going on? Carol asks as she moves forward, but suddenly she doubles over, clutching her head. Oh, what the? She gasps as she falls. The rest of the Avengers suddenly do the same as the Blood Coven steps out of the back of the truck. The Daywalker couldn't make it, but thank you for inviting us, Avengers, Bloodstorm says as he steps out. My warriors have been waiting for this, the leader says as he orders Megrim to maintain the psychic assault, while Cruel and Unusual focus on Scarlet Witch. Damascene launches against the Thunder God. The superpowered vampires launch forward, and in moments, Thor is shocked as Damascene cuts through his skin, and Bloodstorm launches at the rest of the Avengers, throwing them into one another before they can even react. The one known as Smoke Eater launches at Carol, bringing her to the ground before she recovers from the psychic attack. Cruel eats pain, Unusual eats magic, I eat spirits, Megrim eats thoughts and leaves only agony. Smoke Eater gloats. Sam moves quickly to fight against Bloodstorm, but his blows are blocked. Ah, Captain America, you I particularly want. You'll be a fine prize for the Master when I turn you. You'll be our symbol then, and your species will weep. Bloodstorm laughs, twisting and throwing Sam away. But T'Challa is there, swinging his spear. Better than you have tried, T'Challa says as he leaps forward. Meanwhile, Cruel has brought down Tony, his barbed wire tendrils snaking into the armor. Tony staggers, his body is riddled with cuts from Damascene's assault. You may cut me, monster, but you cannot turn me and you cannot kill me. Thor growls, but the Cruel shakes his head as another blade cuts through Thor's skull. What? Kill you? What a waste! We want to keep you. The vampire hisses. The Avengers have fallen, Bloodstorm stalking forward to where T'Challa has fallen. Master be pleased. A good first outing, my lovely Blood Coven, Bloodstorm says, and T'Challa shakes his head. No. City prepared to dimensional shift, Black Panther shouts, but the ship has been compromised by Cruel's barbed wire tendril. Thought of everything, didn't they? Sam says as he helps T'Challa to his feet, but Black Panther shakes his head. Not quite. He growls as he leaps forward, launching into an attack against Bloodstorm while ordering the ship to emergency eject the members of the team that it can. Sam, Carol, Vision, and Tony are all teleported away. The last thing that they see is T'Challa falling to Bloodstorm's assault. Can't let them have the symbol, because the world needs a symbol, T'Challa gasps. With his victory snatched away, Bloodstorm bellows in a rage. Meanwhile, on Bleecker Street, Doctor Strange and Clea are poring over every tome that they can find. Stephen, my love, we need to be out there, Clea points out, and Stephen agrees with her, but points out that they can assemble the Montesi formula and they can end this vampire uprising at once, but a voice calls out to them from the shadows. A spell to kill every vampire on Earth? Good trick, Doc. Blade says, stepping into the light, and Strange looks up. It's good to see you, old friend. What is happening? Stephen asks, and Blade shakes his head, explaining that the vampires are organized this time. This is their big push to put the Blood Drinkers on top. They call themselves the Structure, a vampire cult that is spreading across the world before Moon Knight killed their leader, but they found a new leader, one with a plan. Blade tells him as he moves to look out the window, watching the city burn. He tells them that the vampires have already taken out the Avengers with the Blood Coven. A group of vampires have fed on superhumans and gotten their own abilities. Clea and Stephen are stunned for a moment, but Stephen says that they must assemble the Montesi formula and end the vampire threat. You'd do that? Kill every vampire on Earth? Some of them are on our side, aren't they? Blade asks and Stephen nods, but know that as a doctor, sometimes you must cut away a limb to save a patient. Stephen turns it back to his work. You mentioned a new leader of this structure. Who is the mastermind? Is it Dracula? Stephen asks, but Blade shakes his head as he steps behind his old friend. No, nothing like that. The leader of the structure is me. He snarls as he stabs Stephen Strange through the chest. The dawn is ending. The endless night begins. So Dracula dons his strongest armor and grasps his strongest sword. He stands ready as his followers bow before him, looking up as his servant enters the room. Lord Dracula, the spy has returned. Dracula motions her into the room and orders her to report quickly, as the ritual is almost complete. He moves through the castle as the woman follows. Everything is ready for your arrival in Atlanta. However, the unrest has already begun. Rumors of dissent both here and overseas. Vampires who see the changing tide. She reports. Potential traitors are dealt with immediately, Dracula tells his followers. He looks back at her. And the girl? Brielle Brooks is alive, unaware that she's being watched, the woman reports. So Dracula nods to his servant, who stabs the woman in the back, letting her body fall to the stairs. Good. I do not have the time to clean up any more loose ends. Her blood will be enough to fuel my travel, Dracula says as he turns away from the scene. Meanwhile, over in Atlanta, Brielle and her friends have arrived for school, talking about the upcoming test and other personal issues. But as they walk up to the front doors, Brielle feels a weird sensation. She looks up as the skies darken above their heads. though it is in the middle of the day. "Oh no," Brielle whispers, suddenly pain rolling through her head as she falls to her knees. Her friends move to help her, but she motions them away. "Don't touch me, I feel strange. The way I do at night, except it's off," Brielle tells them as she gets to her feet, telling them that she needs to figure out what's going on and heads back to her car. "It's still getting dark," she says as she looks up into the sky, Brielle reaching for the car door and accidentally tearing it away, her strength acting strange because of the darkened sky. She looks at the door in her hands in surprise. "I think someone else is gonna have to drive," she says to her friends. Meanwhile, Dracula's dark wizards have worked their magic, transporting him into a crypt in Atlanta. Stepping from the crypt, Dracula finds a woman backing away in terror from a pair of vampires. "Stay away!" she shouts in fear, and Dracula stalks forward. "I need to find someone. A girl," he says to the vampires. The woman takes the moment of distraction to run away into the night. The vampires turn on the vampire warrior, sneering at him. "You old or out of your mind, bruh? You know how ridiculous you look, right?" the other asks. Dracula raises an eyebrow at them for a moment. Suddenly he moves fast, slashing one's head from his shoulders with his claws. Another stares at him for a moment as Dracula moves forward. "You will stand because I have use for you. I assume you have friends." Meanwhile, the vampire uprising has begun. With her powers activated by the darkened skies, Brielle begins to fight, helping others as the vampire hordes begin to swarm them. She knocks one vampire to the ground, staking him through the heart and shouting for the civilians to run, but when she turns, another pack is rushing at her from the entrance of the alleyway. "You got this. This is what Dad trained me for," Brielle says to herself as she reaches for her sword, but a vampire leaps from above, knocking her to the ground, biting into her arm. The vampire pulls away, looking at his brethren. "She's the one whose blood!" he begins to state before Brielle drives a stake through his heart. More of the horde reaches her and Brielle drops into a combat stance, but she is no longer alone as Dracula is moving in a blur, his sword cleaving through several monsters with one blow. Brielle stares at him in shock as Dracula turns to face the oncoming threat. "Arm yourself, child!" Dracula shouts, Brielle drawing her sword, and the two rush into the fight, cleaving vampires apart with powerful blows, cutting through them, turning the alley into a swirl of ash. In a moment, the fight is over. Brielle whirls back, brandishing her sword. "I know you! You're Dracula!" Dracula nods, lowering his weapon. "Then Blade told you of me. At least that part of your education isn't lacking, even if your combat remains less than impressive." Dracula notes. Brielle raises her weapon, ordering Dracula to stay back, but he sneers at her. "You must understand me, child. This is not the battle I'm here for," he tells her, but Brielle leaps at him, swiping where Dracula stood moments before, but she hits nothing but missed. Dracula appears behind her, knocking her to the ground. He raises his blade to her throat. "You are Brielle Brooks, the daughter of my oldest enemy, the end of his bloodline. The same events that gave you your nocturnal gifts made finding you a child's endeavor. I did not seek you out for vengeance. The world is ending," Dracula tells her. He pauses for a moment, lowering his blade. "If you come with me, and we are very lucky, we might still yet be able to save it," he says as he sheaths his weapon. Brielle stands in surprise. "You want me to go with you and save the world?" she asks, and Dracula nods as his followers step out of the shadows and encircle him. "These guys with you?" "They are the fastest mode of transportation available," Dracula explains, though she still doesn't trust him. Brielle agrees to go, the followers beginning to weave their blood magic and swirls around them, and as the blood flows away, Brielle finds her and Dracula now standing in New York, outside of the Sanctum Sanctorum. But they're not alone. Above them, the vampires are descending from the rooftops, and a guardian devil is watching on. Our story now goes into Blood Hunt, issue number 2. In the impossible city, the Avengers have been defeated. Both Thor and Wanda lay in ruins. Blade is gloating. He turns back to T'Challa. "How do you feel?" he questions. And T'Challa hisses at him through brand new vampire fangs, growling to his vampire lord. Blade stalks forward, leaning in. "Go on. Try and fight me, Black Panther. Try to fight the will of the Lord of the Vampires. You might as well be fighting the tides," Blade says with a smile. With the impossible city secured, Blade turns back to his blood coven. Find me the girl! Meanwhile, in the dark alleyways of New York City, a mother is holding up a stun gun. She's trying to protect her 2 sons. Stay back, the oldest says, brandishing the pipe that he holds at the vampires that are stalking towards them. Hey, he said stay back, Brielle says as she swings her sword, the daughter of Blade, slashing through the neck of the first vampire, killing him. The others all rush at her, but then there's a sweep of blinding speed and they all fall to the ground, burning to ash. We do not have time for this, Dracula says, stepping through the ashes. You're too important to all of this, Brielle, to risk your life for the insignificant, Dracula says as the civilians rush past him. He reminds Brielle that he brought her to the city for a reason. We are vulnerable, you stupid child. The blood hunt has been lost upon the world, Dracula reminds her, and they turn as more voices echo from the shadows of the alleyway. You're being hunted. Hello, daughter of Blade. Hello, Dracula. The voice says, and the 2 of them look back in shock. Meanwhile, uptown, Tigra and Hunter's Moon are still fighting against the vampire hordes, trying to get to the Sanctum Sanctorum. As the last vampire falls, Tigra motions to Hunter's Moon to push forward. We have to find Dr. Strange. He's our best chance at dealing with this mess, Tigra says to her friend, when suddenly they both look up as Spider-Man drops on them. Hey, did you say Dr. Strange? Miles asks as the heroes jump back in surprise at seeing him. After introductions are made, Tigra nods her head. Yeah, we're going to Dr. Strange. Oh, thank God, I have no idea where his house is, Miles tells her. They all round the corner and Tigra motions to the large Sanctum Sanctorum. Yeah, it's real inconspicuous, Spider-Man, she tells him. Okay, I'm new here. No one tells me these things, Miles shouts at her. Hunter's Moon patting him on the shoulder. Don't feel bad. I didn't know where it was either, he tells him. Tigra bangs on the door and shouts for Strange. At that moment, his ghost pushes its head through the door. Ah, Tigra, welcome, Dr. Strange's ghost says, motioning them inside. As they move through the halls, Tigra points out that Strange should be helping instead of floating around in his astral form. Well, I'm in my astral form due to some complications with my corporeal self, Strange tells her, motioning to the parlor where Clea is currently holding the vampiric Dr. Strange in a spell. Things have gone to hell here as well. Meanwhile, Dracula and Brielle watch as the Blood Coven stalks towards them. Dracula raises his sword to the team leader. Bloodstorm 1. It's been quite some time, clone. Bloodstorm nods. Are you impressed with how I've grown, Gene Father? What a monster I've become, Bloodstorm responds. Dracula looks to the others, commanding them to kneel before their lord. But the vampires, they shake their heads, explaining that there is a new lord of the vampire nation. We serve the true lord. We serve the true philosophy of our kind, Bloodstorm hisses. But suddenly they are not alone, as the remnants of the Avengers descend upon them. Here's our philosophy. We have a lot to avenge, Captain Marvel says. The Blood Coven moves to attack, with Megrim preparing to mentally stun the heroes. But in a blaze of movement, she's gone. The vampires all look up in shock as Vision flies her away, explaining that his synthetic brain is weak against her powers, but he can cycle his own brain patterns to counteract her. Captain Marvel lunges forward, hitting Bloodstorm hard, knocking the leader into a wall, while Vision takes Megrim above the black clouds, allowing the sun to eradicate her. Now that they haven't been ambushed, the Avengers are pushing their attack, able to counteract the vampires' superpowers, until Vision descends once more and bathes the area in stored solar energy. You sucker punched us before, but even at half strength, we're still the Avengers, Captain Marvel says as she sends a blast into the air that separates the dark clouds and allows the sunlight to beam down on them, forcing the Blood Coven back and opening a portal to retreat. Next time, Avengers, next time will be for everything, Bloodstorm promises before disappearing. Sam Wilson rushes forward. I want to follow, but Carol stops him with a hand on his shoulder. We'll get the others back. We'll take the impossible city back, and we'll save our friends, Carol promises. Brielle turns to the Avengers and tells them that she and Dracula need to get to the Sanctum Sanctorum. Once there, they're greeted by Strange's astral form and the other heroes. We have to move quickly and plan. Already, we've been gathering forces. Spider-Man and my colleagues from the Midnight Mission, Strange says as he motions to the heroes in the parlor. Upon seeing Spider-Man, Brielle rushes across the room. Spider-Man, finally someone I know. Listen, with all of this going down, I can't find my dad, Brielle says to her friend, having recently done a vampire adventure with Miles. But Miles suddenly begins to growl, grabbing at his mask, ripping it off to reveal vampiric fangs as he hisses at her.
Thanks, Benny. I'll take it from here. Blade walks through the impossible city, far above the earth. He turns to the holographic image of T'Challa. Have you found it, T'Challa? Have you found my prize? Blade demands, and his vampiric minion nods. Yes, buried deep beneath the earth of Wakanda, where it has laid since the fall of Atlantis. Blade nods and turns away, ordering T'Challa to use the Impossible City translocation drive to bring him his prize. But a voice calls out to him. Congratulations, Scarlet Witch calls from her magical cell. It would appear you've gotten everything you wanted, she tells Blade. But she motions to Blade's wounded Blood Coven, who are recovering from their last fight with the Avengers. You struck hard and fast. We never saw it coming, but the Avengers' eyes are open now. And when that gaze falls upon you, you will wither, she says. Meanwhile, at the Sanctum Sanctorum, Miles Morales leaps at his friends, bearing his vampire fangs, and he hisses as he tries to kill Brielle. Vision reaches for the young hero, but Miles Morales shocks him with a venom blast, knocking him away. Spider-Man, don't make me! Brielle shouts at her friend as she draws her sword. But Clea reaches out with her magic and traps Spider-Man in the crimson bands of Sidorak. Quickly, Stephen, she shouts. Doctor Strange's astral projection rushes forward. Let the eye of Agamotto show you the truth, Strange shouts as a flash of light fills the room. Miles collapses to the ground, holding his head. Blade's control over him is broken. He reaches a hand to his new fangs. Shock on his face. Oh my God. He told me to hunt for her. I couldn't fight it, Miles whispers, looking at the heroes gathered around him. Stephen nods in understanding and motions to his own vampiric body, which is still being held by magic. You are not alone, Spider-Man. He came to us as a friend, and then he struck. Now, I also bear his curse, Stephen explains. Brielle looks around, explaining that she still doesn't fully understand and wants to know who is behind this vampire uprising. Stephen looks at Dracula in surprise, shocked that he hadn't explained all of this before bringing Brielle to New York. Dracula shrugs. How do you think a conversation like that would have gone, Strange? Come with me, child. In order to save the world, you must strike down your father, the new Lord of Vampires. Dracula scoffs. Brielle stares in shock as Dracula explains that Blade has led the vampire uprising, defeating the Avengers, taking control of Impossible City, and plunging the world into darkness. Dracula turns to her, explaining that she is Blade's one weakness. And to save Earth, she must strike down her father. Brielle puts up her hands. No, my dad? That's crazy, she says softly. Tigra looks at Dracula, questioning why they should trust him. But Dracula points out that Blade will destroy the vampire nation just as he will destroy every other nation on Earth. And Hunter's Moon steps forward, looking at the gathered heroes. Enough! The world dies and we argue? Save it until we save everyone, he says. Stephen nods as he steps to Hunter's Moon's side. Well said, Fist of Khonshu. It would seem that this crisis has three parts. The Dark Force stealing the sun, the vampires rampaging, and Blade, Strange says. But the others look around, realizing that Brielle is no longer with them. Miles pulls off his mask, angry with Dracula for being so callous with Brielle. You tell her she needs to strike down her father? How do you expect her to react? He snaps. Dracula glares at him as they both head for the door. Do not presume to lecture me, Spider-Man, he growls. And they both head out into the night, with Dracula unwilling to let his one chance of defeating Blade slip through his fingers. Steven shouts for the pair to wait, but they ignore him and head into the night. We do not have time to chase after them, Steven, Clea reminds her love. The rest of the heroes turn to each other. Tigra explains that the Midnight Mission has a plan to deal with the vampires, though they still require a third member for their party. Captain Marvel steps forward with a nod, explaining that they'll deal with Blade and the Blood Coven. We just need to draw them out, Sam Wilson says. Hunter's Moon looks to Clea. Lady Clea, you are a good friend to my brother. We ask that you send us far away. Myself, Tigra, and one other, he asks. Clea nods and begins to cast her spell. Anything for the Midnight Mission. Anything for the memory of Mark Spector, she says before the heroes disappear to some far-off location. But the Avengers won't wait around for Blade to strike again. Carol turns to her team, telling them that they need to give Earth hope. She looks to Tony and asks him to tap into all transmissions around the globe. And next, she turns to Sam Wilson. You're up, she says. Sam looks at her in shock, pointing out that she is the leader of the team. And you're the icon. This is why T'Challa saved you, she says, pointing to the star on his chest. Sam nods his head. With a sigh, he remembers a conversation that he had with T'Challa not long ago. As Tony starts the broadcast, Sam addresses the people of Earth. I am Sam Wilson, Captain America, speaking for the Avengers, Sam begins. Around the world, people hear his words. He tells them that otherworldly beings have threatened Earth time and time again. That each time, Earth's mightiest heroes and the everyday people have stood up and said no. Throughout the world, people hear Sam's voice as they fight back, defending themselves from the armies of darkness. Sam tells the people that they will get through this, that once again, the Earth will say no, that they will win. They will beat back the darkness. We're still here. We will win, just like we won all those times before. Just hold on until the sun shines again. Captain America out, Sam finishes. Carol looks at him in shock, moved by his words. That was perfect, she whispers. It was a conversation I had with T'Challa. I thought if he could hear it, he'd recognize it, Sam says. Tony looks at the team, wondering if Blade will come after them now. On board the Impossible City, Blade bellows with rage. He turns away from the finished broadcast of Captain America and turns to the hologram of T'Challa. Panther, change of plans. Retarget the translocation drive, he shouts as he gathers the Blood Coven. Your friends have decided that they will not simply lay down and die. They had to inspire hope in this doomed world, and that I cannot let stand, he shouts as he prepares for war. Far below, the translocation gate opens above Central Park. People look up in fear as they already flee from the vampire hordes. But something new is coming. The massive object drops from the sky and slams into the ground, destroying all beneath it. The Temple of the First Blasphemy has arrived. Meanwhile, Doom sits upon his throne in Latveria, staring down at his two visitors. Things must be going very badly if you've come to me for aid, he says to Clea and the astral form of Doctor Strange. He smiles and leans back on the throne. Would that be a fair assessment of the situation, Steven? You can tell me. Doctor to doctor, Doom gloats. Meanwhile, in the Temple of the First Blasphemy, which now sits in a cradle in Central Park, a portal opens. Blade steps through, his arms extended to take in the temple. He smiles as he glances back at his blood coven and T'Challa. Finally, do you have any idea how long it's been since I've walked these halls, T'Challa? Blade asks. T'Challa follows him, but realization has finally dawned on him. You're not Blade, are you? Black Panther asks. Blade smiles and shakes his head, turning his yellow eyes upon the hero. No, I am something much greater, and I will become greater still. They continue to walk through the halls of the temple, with Blade promising that the end is near, that he will finish what he started long ago. What are you? T'Challa demands. Blade turns, and in a flash of light, T'Challa can almost see the creature's true image. The massive bat creature seems to show its true face. The first Black Panther, the first vampire, my spirit now clad in the Daywalker's skin. I am Varney, Blade proclaims. At the Castle of Doom, Clea and Strange are shocked by Doom's revelation of Blade's true identity. Doom waves away the idea as if it was common knowledge. It's obvious if you merely think about it, Doom says, explaining that years ago, Varney tried to take Blade as his vessel, but the ritual failed. It would seem that a second attempt did not fail, Doom notes. Steven nods and explains to Doom that they need to control the Dark Force, to return the sun to its rightful place, that it's the only way for them to defeat the vampire hordes. Ah, the Dark Force. I have precautions for that, Doom promises. Clea takes a step forward. If it is magic, then let us put it into motion. Time is of the essence. What do you require, Doom? Clea asks. Doom nods and steps down from his throne, explaining that he needs a great assembly of mages to cast the spell. Strange offers to gather all that he knows, but Doom shakes his head and motions to a shadowy corner of the throne room. No need. I have already taken the liberty of gathering the student body of your Strange Academy, Doom says. Clea and Strange are shocked, but they don't have time to question how Doom did this. And now, Steven, give it to me and let us begin, Doom says. But Strange doesn't understand what Doom is asking. Doom glances at him. I should think you'd understand. This is an extraordinary work of magic we are speaking of casting. And to enact it, I need to be the Sorcerer Supreme, Doom states, bringing a shocked look to Doctor Strange. Meanwhile, in Asgard, Tigra and Hunter's Moon slip through the shadows, their new companion following behind. Questioning why they don't just ask the Asgardians for help, Tigra glances over her shoulder, explaining that they don't have the time to be polite or give the Asgardians a chance to say no. Finally, they reach their destination. Hunter's Moon has felt the call of his god, and finally stands outside Khonshu's prison vault. Hello, Father. I've come for you, Hunter's Moon says, as he stands before the massive door. He looks through the small bars into the darkness of the cell. My loving son, so kind of you to visit your father, but foolish, I fear. I have no power to lend you in opening the door, Khonshu explains. But Hunter's Moon shakes his head and motions to their shadowy companion. I have no power to open this door, and no key, but I have something better. The locksmith steps forward from the shadows and smiles, smacking his magical crowbar in his hand. Nice to meet ya. They call me the Wrecker, Wrecker says as he pushes his Asgardian crowbar into the door jamb. Energy begins to flow as the door begins to loosen. Back at the temple, Varney's plans have almost reached their end. He is gloating to T'Challa about his victory as he motions to Scarlet Witch and Thor, still held captive. Now, I have the living Darkhold and the blood of a god. I can complete the ritual, he says. He accepts a bowl of Thor's blood from Bloodhunter, drinking deeply of it. My vampire form was just the beginning. I was always meant for more. Meant to be the end of all things, Varney says, blood dripping from his lips. He holds up his hands, and the dark force begins to flow into him. He raises up as it gives him power, the temple glowing around him. Do you see? I am becoming one with the darkness. I am becoming the darkness that consumes the light. I am becoming the vampire that consumes the planet, entire stars. I am becoming the unliving dark force, Varney declares. But a light begins to shine, and Varney looks at it in surprise. The clouds begin to pass as the moon appears. It can't be, Varney whispers. Across the world, gripped by the fangs of evil, light begins to shine. Portals open in the moonlight, and the last fists of Khonshu begin to arrive. Clad and armed with silver, they rush down into the streets, protecting all those travelers of the night, led by the new Moon Knight. Varney lowers to the ground, anger flashing through his blood-red eyes. The Moon God. No matter, too late to do any good, Varney scoffs. But T'Challa leaps forward, a blade in his hand as he moves to stab the vampire. Dark Force tendrils snake out, grabbing a hold of T'Challa and lifting him into the air. Defiance? Impossible! Your blood is my own. Tell me how, Varney orders. T'Challa smiles. His teeth are normal once more. Do you think Wakanda has never fought vampires? That our gods abandoned us? The heart-shaped herb has been healing my infection bit by bit, T'Challa snaps. Varney laughs as he pulls him closer. Ha! Again, no matter. Did you really think that you could kill me with that tiny blade? He asks, motioning to T'Challa's weapon. Energy begins to crackle around them as T'Challa shakes his head. No, not really. I was just removing it so that Thor might join us, he says. Behind them, Thor stands, lightning crackling through the air as the god turns an angry stare at the vampires. Insult and injury I have suffered, and Thor will have recompense, the god growls. Behind Thor, the rest of the Avengers appear, ready for the final fight. That's just fancy talk for avenging, Tony says as he lands. T'Challa slashes his way free and stands with his friends. Varney nods and motions the heroes forward. Come then, come and face the unliving Dark Force, he orders. Standing in the throne room of Castle Doom, Victor Von Doom has just revealed to Clea and Steven that he can bring the sun back, but the spell will require him to take up the mantle of the Sorcerer Supreme. Clea steps forward, anger in her voice. Gods, Victor! You remain utterly without shame, she snaps at him. But Victor stands tall, hands on his hips as he eyes them coolly. I alone possess the knowledge of the ritual to turn back the darkness. But I cannot enact it without the mantle of the Sorcerer Supreme. I am going to save the world, Clea. The very purpose of the Sorcerer Supreme, Doom tells her. Steven lowers his head. He's right, he admits. The astral projection looks back up at Doom, admitting that the dictator has finally outmaneuvered him. Tell me, did you engineer this entire crisis for this moment? Steven asks. Meanwhile, in Central Park, the Avengers launch into the final battle against the Blood Coven. now joined once more by Thor. Vision rushes forward, knocking out the super vampire that holds Wanda captive. Freed, she finally gets to her feet. Finally, free to take my revenge, she growls. T'Challa and Sam launch an attack against Bloodstorm and knock him away. As the two prepare to continue their attack, T'Challa looks back at his friend. Thanks, Sam, for the aid and for the speech. It reached me, T'Challa says softly. Nearby, tendrils of the Dark Force slither around Varney, but Thor steps forward. Varney, it has been 1,000 years since we last met. It will be my pleasure to introduce you to Mjolnir once more, Thor says, holding up his hand to call forth his magical hammer. But it takes a moment, and Thor looks back to Varney, hammerless. The vampire lord smiles. Mjolnir remains in orbit, Thor. Can I kill you before it arrives? He asks, drawing forth blade swords. The two godlike creatures rush at each other. Let's find out. God to God. Nearby, Tony and Wanda are fighting back to back. Tony fires a blast off and shouts for Wanda to cast the Montesi formula. But she says no, refusing to wipe out an entire race of people. Again. Bloodstorm laughs as he grabs hold of Vision and rips the hero apart. Weak, all of you. That is why we are your betters. Your humanity prevents you from seizing victory. Bloodstorm snarls as he drops the wounded Vision to the ground. In his throne room, Doom holds out a hand to Stephen. The Avengers have engaged Varney and his creatures. The moon god Khonshu has dispatched his dead acolytes around the world to fight the vampire armies. But it will not be enough, he explains, demanding the mantle of the Sorcerer Supreme. Strange finally nods, but asks Doom to prove that he is honorable. I want your oath, Victor. I want your word. Once the world is saved, you will return to me what is mine, Strange says. Victor stares at him before nodding slightly. You have my word, the word of Doom, Victor rumbles. Stephen nods and begins to cast the spell. Clea shouts for him to stop, but Stephen transfers the mantle of the Sorcerer Supreme to Victor. Light and smoke fill the room, and when it clears, Doom stands before them with Strange's cloak, supreme magic swirling around him. All hail the Sorcerer Supreme, Stephen says softly. But Victor shakes his head, magical energy pulsing in his hand. No. All hail Doom. In New York, Dracula and Brielle are crossing the city, heading towards Central Park and the temple that Varney has summoned. But they are joined by Miles Morales, having fought against his vampire curse. You're gonna do it? You're gonna go after your dad? Miles asks as he flips in and lands next to Brielle. She nods, telling Miles that it's her responsibility. That is why Blade trained her. Back at the fight, Thor is knocked away by the Dark Force tendrils. They wrap around him, pinning him to the ground. Of all the Avengers, I think I hate you the most, Odin's son, Varney says as he floats forward. But energy crackles around them, and Thor holds up his hand and Varney looks up in shock as Mjolnir arrives with a bolt of lightning, knocking the vampire lord away and dispelling the Dark Force for a moment. The Avengers continue to fight, but the super vampires are starting to beat them back. Suddenly, they look up to see white cloaks approaching. The dead warriors of Khonshu have arrived, led by Mark Spector, the resurrected Moon Knight. I'm back, and I've brought friends, Moon Knight says, motioning for the dead warriors to launch into an attack against the vampires. At Castle Doom, Victor leads Stephen and Clea into his antechamber, where the students of Strange Academy are gathered. He looks at them all, explaining that they are about to cast a spell and will try to undo an ancient Atlantean spell, written by the same hand that wrote the Darkhold. In other words, this is powerful magic we seek to undo, he says as he looks to Stephen's students. He stands in the middle of the group, holding up his hands and leading them in the casting of the spell. The students do their part, magical energy flowing from each of them. I will weave the many colors of our magic together in an act of wizardry never before seen. His eyes begin to glow as the magic flows through him. I will lead our ritual. I will focus our efforts. I will save the world. All I ask from you is everything, Doom declares. The battle continues, even with Moon Knight and the dead fists of Khonshu at their side. The Avengers begin to falter. The more powerful members launch an assault against Varney, but the power of the Dark Force holds them back. Tendrils snake out and capture the heroes, holding them at bay and swallowing their power. He is being powered by an entire dimension. He grows stronger with each moment, Wanda shouts to her friends. Varney stands triumphant, a smile on his face. I only had one weakness, Avengers. The girl. And she is not here, he growls. Varney looks up in shock as Dracula swoops overhead, releasing Betrayal, who drops onto Varney and stabs him in the chest. No, I'm here to save my dad, Betrayal snarls. Varney lets out a shout of pain as the sword pierces his chest, but he just smiles. It is too late, child. It is not enough. My possession of your father has gone on too long. This body is as much mine as it is his. You are of his bloodline, not mine, Varney cries. Then how about both of us? Miles shouts as he flips through the fight, driving a stake into Varney's chest. You turned me into a vampire, so that means I am of your bloodline, Miles shouts. Varney begins to scream in pain. Back at the castle, Doom senses Varney's control of the Dark Force begin to slip. He calls forth the spell, the magic gathering in the room, bathing everything in light. Now I strike, Doom bellows. The Dark Force begins to gather in the sky, swirling as the magical light begins to pierce through it. And Varney continues to bellow, and Wanda steps forward, casting her own magic. Now, be free, Daywalker, she shouts. Varney's spirit appears for a moment as it is forced out of Blade, the massive creature bellowing in rage as he disappears with the Dark Force. Brielle rushes to Blade's side as the Daywalker begins to bleed out. I'm so sorry, she whispers. But Blade shakes his head. No, you did the right thing. You did what I taught you, he whispers to her. But the Avengers move quickly, using magic and Stark tech to stabilize the vampire hunter. I've got half a crash cart in this suit, so just relax, Tony says as he leans over Blade. Gonna have a nasty scar though, Tony tells him. Blade almost smiles. What's one more? The Avengers look up as the last of the Dark Force disappears, revealing the sun once more. The heroes have won, but back at the castle, Strange stands before Doom, congratulating him on the level of spell that he cast. Thank you, Stephen, Doom says. Stephen reaches out for his cloak, asking that Victor honor his oath and return the mantle of the Sorcerer Supreme to him. Victor stares at him for a moment, magical energy gathering around him once more. Your oath, Victor, Stephen says. Doom nods. Yes, my oath, to surrender the office of the Sorcerer Supreme back to you once I save the world. And I have only just begun, Stephen. Doom waves his hand, banishing Stephen's astral projection from his castle. Doom does nothing halfway. Now, let me show you what it means to save the world, Doom says, his eyes glowing with green energy. Back in New York, the heroes are taking a moment. Miles tries to shrink away from the sun when he realizes that he's still a vampire, but he's shocked to find out that it has no effect on him. Dracula smiles and puts a hand on the young hero's shoulder. The sun has lost its sting. It would appear that our people have a new dawn ahead of them, Dracula tells him. Miles is shocked, but before he can say more, Tony alerts the group of heroes to a priority message being broadcast around the world. He holds up his gauntlet, and the massive image of Dr. Doom appears. The vampire threat has ended, and the world is safe once more. And you have one man to thank for that. Earth's new Sorcerer Supreme, Victor Von Doom. And there you have it. Blade is back to normal, vampires can survive in the sun, but more importantly, Dr. Doom is now the Sorcerer Supreme. What do you guys think will happen? Let us know in the comments down below, and let us know what you thought of the video. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel, and we'll see you next time. Rest in peace, Benny.